to revive the hope of peace and a two-state solution, I state clearly, as Prime Minister of this great country, that the United Kingdom formally recognises the State of Palestine.
Britain, Canada and Australia confirmed that they now formally recognize Palestinian statehood. This now piles the pressure on Israel to ease the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It also puts America's three major allies at odds with the Trump administration. The coordinated statements that came on the eve of the annual gathering of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, and later Portugal too confirmed that it's recognizing an independent Palestinian state. France was the first country off the block to announce its intention to recognize a Palestinian state. France made that announcement back in July. It is now pledged to vote for the recognition of an independent Palestinian state at the United Nations this week. France, Britain, Canada and Australia will be joining about 150 members of the United Nations who have already recognized an independent Palestinian state. But the concerted action on the eve of the UNGA by these three countries, Canada, Australia and Britain, across three different continents, will deepen the diplomatic isolation of Israel, and particularly of its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So far, though, the moves to recognize the Palestinian state have not curbed Israel's military campaign against Hamas in Gaza. That war is now going to close in almost 2 years on the 7th of October, and it has already killed more than 65,000 people. While recognition is a symbolic act and support for Palestinian self-determination, the prospect of a viable Palestinian state is in more ways than one most elusive now than it has ever been. A Palestinian state is unlikely to happen anytime soon, and one of the fundamental reasons for that is that much of the territory of a future Palestinian state is either occupied directly by Israel or access to that territory is controlled by Israel.
In the face of the growing horror in the Middle East, we are acting to keep alive the possibility of peace and a two-state solution. That means a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state. At the moment, we have neither.
The coordinated attempts by Britain, France, Australia and Canada has drawn quick condemnation from Israel and its embattled Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu.
יש לי מסר ברור לאותם מנהיגים שמכירים במדינה פלסטינית לאחר הטבח הנורא ב7 באוקטובר. אתם מעניקים פרס עצום לטרור. ויש לי מסר נוסף עבורכם. זה לא יהיה.
Israel has in the recent past attacked Hamas and its leadership inside Qatar, another Persian Gulf Arab state, a treaty ally of the United States, and in fact Qatar is one of the three mediators trying to arrive at a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But after the attack that happened earlier this month, now that ceasefire looks more unlikely than ever. Far from scaling back after the attack on Qatar, Israeli troops have now expanded their combat operations. They are right now, even as we speak, advancing on Gaza's main urban center, Gaza City. But in the UK, critics have faulted Britain's government, the government of Keir Starmer, for not doing more. It has stopped short of accusing Israel of genocide, despite the fact that a large number of Labour MPs have called the government on to do so. While on the one hand, Britain has suspended some weapons sales to Israel, it continues to supply parts for the F-35 fighter jets, which are used by the Israeli Air Force, on people in Gaza. The British government issued sanctions on two far-right ministers who were part of Netanyahu's cabinet, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the security minister, and Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister. Downing Street has also signaled that it could arrest Netanyahu if he entered Britain. In fact, the British Prime Minister has said that UK will pledge to fulfill its legal obligations as set out by both domestic and international law. The International Criminal Court had issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu last November. But the moves by France, Britain, Canada and Australia raise fundamental questions about what the recognition of a Palestinian state actually means and what it can actually accomplish on the ground. So the question is, what is a state and how is it recognized? The criteria for statehood was laid down in an international treaty called the Montevideo Convention back in 1933. Any state must include four elements: a permanent population, defined territorial boundaries, a government, and an ability to conduct international affairs. Recognition of a state is official acknowledgement that this would-be state would broadly meet these four conditions. The borders of a future Palestinian state are disputed with Israel, but they're broadly understood to be in Israeli-occupied territories, which is the West Bank and Gaza. Both these contested territories were seized by Israel in 1967 after the Israel-Arab War. In addition, there is also East Jerusalem, which Israel annexed, and it will never give up on Jerusalem because it's been the seat of power of the Jewish Empire for thousands of years. The Palestinian Authority is the government body that administers the part of West Bank. It represents Palestinians both inside and outside of this territory, while Hamas has been in control of Gaza since 2005. While there are limits to what the Palestinian Authority can and cannot do, given the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Hamas's control of Gaza, foreign recognition of a Palestinian state would mean the establishment of direct diplomatic contacts between the State of Palestine and whichever country is recognizing it. Recognition would also send diplomatic and political messages. Ambassadors will have to be placed in the respective capitals. It would also acknowledge Palestinian right to self-determination and reject the positions and the actions of the Israeli government. Now, most countries in the United Nations, about 150 out of the 190 plus countries, have already recognized a Palestinian state. India recognized an independent Palestinian state in 1988. Britain and France recognizing an independent Palestine is important because they carry weight as permanent members of the UN Security Council. They can then have the power to veto any resolution that's brought forth in the Council. Britain and France would also be strengthening the stand taken by most other countries in the UN. It would send a huge political message to the Trump administration because 4 out of 5 permanent members, that includes China, Russia, Britain, and France, will be recognizing a Palestinian state, which means the United States is the only permanent member of the UNSC which has veto power, which is still holding out on recognizing an independent Palestine. The State of Palestine currently has observer status at the United Nations. That will not change so long as the United States maintains its opposition to having an independent Palestine. So net-net, while this move by Canada, Britain, France, etc. is highly symbolic, it is unlikely to change anything on the ground.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.